Hello again. I see you made it to the quiet part of the day. Tonight, you don't need to be understood. You don't have to explain how much you're carrying. You can just let it loosen. Let your eyes soften. Let your shoulders drop. Nothing urgent now. No roles to play. No one waiting for your next thought. Just your breath. Slow, gentle, yours. Let it rise and fall without trying to change anything. If your hands feel tight, let them open. If your jaw feels clenched, let it go slack. If your spine feels like it's still holding the weight of the day, let it soften into the bed like it's finally allowed to. You don't have to be ready for sleep. You just have to let yourself arrive. And if you are here, then you're already doing enough. So stay a little longer. Let the room grow quieter around you. Let the breath find its rhythm. Let your body remember what it means to rest. We're not going anywhere. Not yet. Just here. Just breathing. Just staying long enough to begin. There are stories that begin loud, with sparks, with rush, with names you never thought you'd forget. But this story begins with a breath, a stillness, a moment of looking back quietly without flinching. Because reunion isn't always about another person. Sometimes it's about the version of yourself you left behind in a season that hurt too much to stay. Sometimes it's about circling back, not to relive, but to understand. To see the past not as a wound, but as a garden you weren't ready to tend at the time. And now something in you has softened. You're no longer trying to race ahead. You're no longer holding your breath, waiting to be chosen. You're not asking life to rush its answers. You're just here. And maybe that's all reunion really is. A meeting, not just between two hearts, but between what was and what could be. Between what hurt you and what grew from it. So let's begin, not in haste, not in grief, but in the quiet space where memory meets maturity, where longing has turned into listening, and where maybe, just maybe, something you thought was on is making its way home again. Slowly, gently, in you. There are some people you meet before you're ready, not because the timing is cruel, but because life hasn't shaped you enough to hold what they bring. You look back and remember how pure it felt, the way your chest opened without armor, the way your laughter came easier around them, the way your body leaned in without needing permission. There was something fearless in how you loved them, and something unfinished in how it ended, because you didn't yet know how to stay. You loved with everything you had, but what you had was still tangled in fear, still wrapped in old stories about worth, still unsure of what it meant to be truly seen and not run from it. So you did what people do when the heart wants to leap, but the mind hasn't caught up. You stumbled. You pulled away and called it space. You doubted, even as they stood steady. You tried to protect what hadn't been threatened, and in all that protecting, you lost the one thing that didn't want to hurt you. But it's not blame that rises now. It's something quieter, something heavier. Gratitude, maybe. Grief, definitely. The kind of grief that doesn't scream. It just sits at the edge of your chest some mornings when you hear a song that once made you feel held. Because the truth is, they didn't leave because they stopped caring. They left because love, unheld, becomes too heavy to carry alone. And you hadn't yet grown hands soft enough to hold it. You were still learning how to be soft with yourself, still treating your own needs like burdens, still calling your pain too much before anyone else could. And so you watched them walk away, not in anger, but in that slow, aching silence that only happens when two people realize they met at the wrong chapter. They were not your mistake. They were your mirror. The first one who showed you what tenderness could feel like before you had language for it. And that stays. Even now, even here, even as you move through your days with more understanding, more self-forgiveness, more room to breathe. They were the beginning of your unfolding, of your undoing, of your becoming. Not because they stayed, but because they showed you what it might feel like to be met. If you could one day meet yourself first. And maybe that was never too soon. Maybe it is exactly when you needed to begin again, years before you'd realize you were worthy of returning to. There's a particular kind of silence that comes after love ends. It's not the same as loneliness, not the sharp, immediate void. No, this one is slower, quieter, like walking through a house you used to live in, still recognizing every corner, but knowing you can't stay. It follows you into mornings where coffee tastes duller, into songs that used to be just songs, now carrying someone else's name. It shows up in the small moments, like reaching for your phone to share something, only to realize there's no one on the other end of that impulse anymore. And you don't cry, not always. Sometimes you just sit there with that strange hollowness and wonder if they feel it too. The silence isn't loud, it's subtle, but it lingers. It fills the space where your voice once softened, where your laughter used to rise without checking the room first. You keep expecting it to fade, but silence after love doesn't vanish. It settles. It becomes a texture to your days, a background hum beneath the noise of moving on. And sometimes you mistake it for peace. You tell yourself, I'm okay. It's better this way. I don't need them anymore. But deep down, you know those words are armor. Thin, fragile, protective, yes, but not always true. Because the silence still hurts in its own way. Not like a wound, something hard, but like a room where the furniture has been removed and the echoes don't know where to land. And you start to realize the hardest part about love ending isn't just the absence of the person. It's the absence of who you were with them. That version of you, unguarded, hopeful, a little reckless, feels far away now. And that hurts more than you expected. You don't want them back. Not really. What you want is that feeling of being seen, of being chosen in your mess, of belonging to a moment that asked nothing but your presence. But time doesn't rewind, and people don't return the same. So instead, you sit with the silence, not to fill it, not to fix it, but to feel its shape, to let it teach you what it means to hold space for something that once held you. That's how healing begins, not by rushing into noise, but by learning to sit in the stillness and not mistake it for absence. Because sometimes what remains after love isn't just emptiness. Sometimes it's the quiet echo of how deeply you are capable of feeling when you let yourself be real. The mind forgets faster than we think. It edits, reframes, tries to move on. But the body remembers everything. Not just the moments, but the sensations that came with them. Your hands still know the shape of holding. Your shoulders still flinch at the sound of a certain kind of silence. Your breath still catches when someone lingers a second too long at goodbye. You tell yourself it's in the past, that you've let go, that the chapter is closed. But then you walk into a room with dim light, and something in your chest tugs. A song plays in a cafe, a song you haven't heard in years, and your stomach tightens just slightly. You think, why now? But the truth is, the body doesn't operate on logic. It moves on rhythm, on felt memory, on tiny, invisible echoes that never fully leave. Sometimes it's your fingers brushing over fabric that reminds you of a shirt they used to wear. Sometimes it's your back tensing at a tone of voice that isn't theirs, but feels close enough to sting. And sometimes it's in the absence, the way no one else has touched you quite the same way. Not just physically, but with presence, with attention, with the kind of gentleness you didn't know you needed until they offered it. That's the hardest part of healing. Not erasing the past, but learning how to carry what the body still holds. Because memory isn't linear. It loops, it flashes, it arrives uninvited in the middle of otherwise normal days. You don't choose when you remember. You only choose how gently you respond when you do. And sometimes that gentleness looks like stopping, placing your hand over your own chest and whispering, I know, that part of me still misses them. Not to reopen the wound, not to sink back into longing, but to acknowledge that love leaves imprints, even when it's gone. That your body is not betraying you when it flinches at the smell of their cologne or softens at a phrase they used to say. It's just remembering. And you You're learning not to fear that. Because maybe healing isn't about wiping everything clean. Maybe it's about allowing space for the ghost of what once was to sit beside you now and then, without overtaking the room. You're not broken for remembering. You're just human. And some loves, some touches, some moments, they don't leave. They settle, quietly, permanently, into the place where your body holds the proof that you once felt something real. There's always something left unsaid, even in the longest goodbyes, even when you think you said it all, because some things, they don't find their shape until much later, until the quiet, until you're lying awake at 1:37 a.m., replaying not what they did, but what you didn't say. Not because you weren't brave, but because the words hadn't ripened yet. You weren't ready, or maybe the moment wasn't. And now it's too late. Not in the tragic sense, but in the quietly final way that life closes certain doors without slamming them. You think back on the times you stayed silent, when they hurt you just slightly and you smiled anyway. When they asked, "Are you okay?" and you said, "I'm fine," even though your hands were shaking in your lap. You remember the little lies you told to keep the peace, not out of malice, but out of fear. Fear that being honest would make them leave faster. Fear that naming your needs would sound like too much. So you kept it all in. And now you carry the weight of what never got spoken. But here's the truth. Sometimes what you didn't say was your way of surviving the moment. Sometimes silence was the only language your fear understood. And that's okay. You're not weak for not having the words back then. You were trying. Trying to keep love from slipping. Trying to keep yourself intact. Still, there are words that rise now. Not to send, not to fix, but to finally release. Like, I wasn't okay. I needed more than you knew how to give. I loved you so quietly, it almost sounded like absence. I wish I had told you I was scared, not indifferent. I wasn't cold. I was protecting something I hadn't even met yet inside myself. These are not confessions. They're closures. They are not for them. They are for you. For the part of you that has carried all that silence like a secret no one asked about. For the version of you that thought love meant not being a burden. That thought being chosen meant never needing too much. Let that version speak now. Not to explain, not to rewrite, just to exhale. Because saying it, finally, quietly, is how you return to yourself. Not with regret, but with understanding. Some love stories don't get the last chapter. Some conversations never happen. But you still get to write what's true. Even if the only one listening is the person you're becoming. Waiting used to feel like failure, like you weren't moving, like everyone else had figured it out. Love, healing, closure, and you were stay paused, still circling the same questions, still waking up with the same tightness in your chest, still checking your phone even though you promised yourself not to. You told yourself to move on, to grow up, to get over it. But your heart, it had its own timing, and no amount of logic could speed it up. At first, you tried to rush the healing. You filled your time, you booked trips, you scrolled until your thumbs ached, trying to drown the ache with distraction. And when that didn't work, you blamed yourself, thought maybe you were too soft, too sentimental, too slow to forget. But one morning, quiet, uneventful, you realized something strange. The pain wasn't as sharp. It didn't vanish. It didn't announce its exit. It just softened. Like a room you'd been sitting in for so long, your eyes finally adjusted to the dark. And in that softness, you understood something no one had taught you. Waiting wasn't punishment. It was process. You weren't weak for not rushing ahead. You were wise for sitting in the pause. Because real healing, it's not fast. It doesn't bend to willpower. It doesn't care how many days have passed or how much your friends say you deserve better. It moves on soul time. It waits for you to catch up to your grief, to your worth, to the truth you couldn't handle when the pain first arrived. And you were healing all along. In the nights you cried quietly, in the texts you never sent, in the days you chose not to reach back, even when you could have. Those moments weren't nothing. They were everything. They were you building new muscle, not the kind that lifts weight, the kind that learns how to stay. Stay with discomfort. Stay with emptiness. Stay long enough to see who you are when no one else is defining you. That's what waiting really is. Not passive, not weak, but powerful in a way most people never notice. It's the strength of restraint, the courage to pause before you repeat an old pattern, the grace of letting time do its quiet work. So no, you're not behind, you're not late. You're just someone brave enough to feel the full shape of what it means to wait. Not for someone to come back, but for yourself to fully arrive. We're taught to fear loneliness, to run from it, fix it, fill it as fast as we can, with someone new, with constant plans, with noise, as if being alone means something went wrong, as if your aloneness is proof that you are unwanted. But that's a lie. Loneliness is not failure. It's not proof you're broken. It's not a punishment for being too much or not enough. It's just space. The space between who you were and who you are becoming. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Because silence always is when you've been conditioned to believe your worth lives in being chosen. You sit in your room at night, no one texting, no plans ahead, no eyes on you, and something inside whispers, you should have been more lovable. But that voice, it's not truth. It's programming, an echo of all the places that taught you companionship equals value, that love means relevance, that to be alone is to be forgotten. But you are not forgotten. You are simply with yourself in a way most people never allow. And it's in this stillness, unwanted at first, that you begin to hear a different voice, softer, lower, more yours than any voice you've ever known. It doesn't shout. It doesn't promise quick fixes. It says things like, "I'm here. I've been here. I never needed you to be anyone else." And little by little, the ache of loneliness turns into something else. Not joy, not yet, but presence. You begin to move slower, eat slower, look at your face in the mirror without rushing past. You make your bed not because anyone will see it, but because it makes you feel a little more cared for. You walk without music. You let the silence stretch. And instead of running, you start asking, what does this emptiness want to teach me? And sometimes the answer is that you were never empty. You were just quiet enough for the first time to feel the shape of your own soul. And that soul, it doesn't need constant attention. It doesn't crave performance. It doesn't measure your days in how many people thought of you. It only wants truth, your truth. And truth often is born in loneliness. So no, you're not failing. You're arriving, slowly, softly, with both hands open, ready to hold the parts of you that once thought they had to be loved to be alive. Some people don't leave with drama. They don't slam doors. They don't shout. They don't betray you in some grand, unforgettable way. They just fade. A little less present. A little harder to reach. A little more distant in their laughter, like they're already somewhere else. And for a while, you try to follow. You try to shrink back into the version of you they were comfortable with. The one who didn't say too much, didn't feel too deeply, didn't question what didn't feel right. But it doesn't work because something in you has shifted. You've outgrown the space where they once fit. Not because you're better, not because they're bad, but because growth has a way of rearranging things. You start to crave conversations that don't circle the same surface jokes. You want honesty, even when it's messy. You want quiet without tension. You want connection that doesn't require performance. And they, the people who used to feel like home, now feel like a place you once knew but can't live in anymore. You tell yourself you're being too harsh, too sensitive, too picky. But deep down, you know it's not about judgment. It's about resonance. Your nervous system no longer settles around them. You feel the difference in your shoulders, in how you laugh less freely, in how your truth gets smaller around their expectations. And still, you grieve. Not just them, but the version of you who needed them. The nights they showed up. The words that once saved you. Because just as they were real then, they are real now in absence. You miss them, even as you know you can't go back. Because to go back would mean abandoning the self you fought to reclaim. The boundaries you learned to set. The tenderness you earned by being honest, finally, about what hurts. And so, you let them go. quietly, lovingly, sometimes without closure. Because not all endings need an explanation. Some just ask to be honored. You don't have to make them villains. You don't have to rewrite the story to make it easier to release. You just have to keep walking, even with the ache, even with the memory of who they were when you needed them most. And maybe one day you'll see them again, not to return, but to smile across the distance and silently say, "Thank you, you were a chapter, but I'm writing a different book now." Trust doesn't come back all at once. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with certainty. It doesn't say, "You're ready now." It shows up slowly, in moments that feel so small you almost miss them. Like replying honestly when someone asks how you're doing. Like not flinching when someone reaches for your hand. Like allowing laughter to rise without bracing for the drop that usually follows joy. After heartbreak, you become an architect of caution. You build walls that look like independence. You call it boundaries, but sometimes it's fear wearing wiser clothes. You don't mean to be cold. You're just tired. Tired of giving what didn't come back. Tired of mistaking attention for care. Tired of feeling safe, only to realize you were never really held. So you tell yourself, not again. Not this soon. Not unless it's certain. But love, real love, never arrives with certainty. It arrives with invitation. And slowly, if you let it, you begin to accept. One deep breath at a time. One conversation that doesn't leave you feeling smaller. One quiet moment where someone sees you and your body doesn't flinch. That's trust. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to stay anyway. To stay present. To stay open. To stay honest, even when your voice trembles. You start to realize you can be cautious and still receive. You can be healing and still love. You can have been broken and still be capable of holding something whole. Because trust isn't about forgetting what hurt you. It's about remembering what you deserve. It's choosing to believe that your heart is still worthy, not in spite of its scars, but because of them. Each mark a lesson, each ache a reminder, each closed door a redirection to something more honest. And no, you don't open up all at once. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 reflexive retreat. Sometimes you push people away just to see if they'll reach back gently. Sometimes you test the water long before you even dip a toe. But still, you're trying. And that trying, that counts. That's how trust returns. Not loudly, not quickly, but surely. Like the steady beat of your own heart saying, "I'm still here, and I still believe in something softer." There are versions of you that were never meant to last. Not because they were wrong, but because they were built for survival, not for living. The people pleaser, the one who laughed too loud to hide the trembling, the one who apologized before speaking, just in case the truth was too heavy for the room. You wore them like armor. They kept you safe. They made you palatable. They knew how to read the air, shift the tone, disappear in plain sight. And for a long time, those versions of you worked. They kept the peace. They helped you belong. They got you through places that didn't know how to hold your full self. But over time, they began to ache. You started feeling hollow after conversations, tired after being on for too long, lonely even in connection. Because when you're only loved for the version you perform, you start to feel unloved entirely. And so quietly, without any grand decision, you began to shed them. Not out of rebellion, not out of resentment, but out of exhaustion. Because pretending takes energy, and you were tired. Tired of laughing when things weren't funny. Tired of nodding when something felt wrong. Tired of being easy to love by being easy to forget. So you stopped softening your truth, stopped over-explaining your worth, stopped asking permission to exist fully, and the world shifted. Some people pulled away, some connections cracked, some rooms felt colder, because the version of you they loved, she didn't survive the becoming. And that's okay. You're not here to remain digestible. You're not here to be everyone's favorite. You're here to be whole, even if that wholeness costs you familiarity, even if that truth burns the bridges that were only ever scaffolding. And yes, you miss her sometimes. The old you, the agreeable one, the one who could pretend everything was fine with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. But that version of you, she got you here. She carried your wounds. She learned the hard way. She loved the wrong people with her entire chest. She walked so you could rest. And now, you honor her, not by going back, but by going forward without the weight of her performance. You let her rest. You let her go. And in doing so, you finally make space for the version of you that doesn't have to disappear to be loved. You used to think love meant disappearing, making yourself smaller so they would stay, softer so they wouldn't leave, easier so no one would call you difficult. You thought being loved meant being agreeable, so you learned to read moods before anyone spoke. You learned to say, "I'm fine," even when your chest felt like breaking glass. You became fluent in silence, because silence felt safer than rejection. And for a while, it worked. They stayed. You smiled. Everyone was happy. Except you. You stopped recognizing your own voice, stopped trusting your own yes. Your no never made it past your lips. And somewhere along the way, without meaning to, you became a stranger in your own life. That's what happens when love is tied to performance. You start to believe that who you are is too much and only the polished, edited version deserves to be chosen. But real love doesn't ask you to shrink. It doesn't thrive on your silence. It doesn't measure your value in how little you need. Real love says, bring all of it. The loud, the unsure, the grieving, the glowing. Not so it can fix you, but so it can witness you. And that kind of love, it begins with you, with unlearning the idea that sacrifice equals devotion. With rewriting the story that says love must come at the cost of self. Because the truth is, you can hold someone's hand without letting go of your own spine. You can open your heart without giving away the map back to yourself. It starts slowly. You speak when something doesn't feel right. You take up space at the table. You say no without apology. You let someone love you without twisting yourself into who you think they want. And yes, some people will leave because they weren't in love with you. They were in love with your compliance. But the ones who stay, they'll meet you. Not just the easy parts, but the full, textured, beautifully flawed landscape of who you really are. And when that happens, when you're loved for your realness, not your reduction, you finally understand. Loving someone fully should never mean losing yourself completely, because the kind of love that lasts is the kind that lets you keep coming home, to them and to you. There are mornings when the mirror feels like a stranger. You stand in front of it, bare face, tired eyes, heart still heavy from dreams you can't quite remember. And something in you winces, not just at your reflection, but at the weight behind your eyes. The story they've been carrying, the lines that don't lie. You don't say it out loud, but the thoughts come fast. I look tired. I've aged. No one's coming. You try to shake it off, brush your teeth, pull on clothes, smile at yourself like you're okay. But some days, the mirror doesn't lie for you. It shows what you've been avoiding. The sadness, the grief, the dullness that creeps in when life feels paused. And it hurts. Not because you want to be flawless, but because you just want to feel like yourself again. But who is that? Is she the girl who once glowed from being chosen? Is she the one who lit up when someone texted back quickly? Is she the version of you who only felt pretty in someone else's eyes? You start to realize the harshness isn't coming from the glass. It's coming from the years of believing that your worth was external, that you needed reflection to feel real. So you start small. You stop asking the mirror to love you. You ask it to see you, to witness the woman who has survived so many endings, who has cried quietly into pillows, then showed up to work like nothing was breaking. The woman who no longer starves herself for affection, but still sometimes aches to be held. You touch your face, not to fix, but to acknowledge. This is what strength looks like. Not filtered, not praised, but real. Some days you'll still want to look away. That's okay. But on others, you'll catch a glimpse not of beauty, but of becoming. And it'll stop you because the reflection won't say you're perfect. It'll say something softer. You're here, still trying, still worthy. And maybe that's enough. Not a transformation, not a revelation, just a quiet moment where you let the mirror be what it is, a witness, not a judge. And you, for once, simply meet yourself without flinching. Some strength doesn't look like strength. It doesn't shout, doesn't lift heavy things, doesn't win medals or stand on podiums. It looks like brushing your teeth after a long night of crying. It looks like getting out of bed when the weight in your chest says, "What's the point?" It's answering, "I'm okay," even when you're not, because you don't want to worry your mother again. It's replying to emails, showing up to work, feeding your dog, returning that text, even when your body feels like fog. This kind of strength is invisible. No one claps for it. There's no parade for surviving another day of being unseen. But still, you do it. And that matters more than you think. Because not all battles are loud. Some happen in silence, behind closed doors, in the hours before dawn, when your mind replays every mistake, and still you manage to breathe through it. That's strength. The kind that looks like softness. The kind that isn't rewarded, but is relentless. People don't always notice it. They don't see the way you hold space for others while carrying your own heaviness. They don't know how much effort it takes to not snap back when you're tired, to stay kind when you're depleted, to keep believing in love when yours was never quite returned. But you do it anyway, not for credit, not for attention, but because somewhere deep inside, you still believe you're becoming something worth being. And that's the quietest kind of faith. It's lighting a candle in a room no one else will enter. It's writing to a future version of yourself you hope will be proud you kept going. And maybe she will be. Maybe one day you'll look back and realize this season, the one where everything felt invisible, was actually where you found the kind of strength that can't be undone. Because it wasn't given, it was earned. Alone, uncelebrated, but real. So if no one has told you lately, the way you keep showing up, it counts. The way you choose tenderness when bitterness would be easier, it matters. You're not weak for struggling. You're strong for surviving in silence. And the world might not see it, but your soul does. And it's thanking you for not giving up on becoming someone whole. There comes a point, quiet, unmarked, where you realize you can't go back. Not just to the person, or the place, or the life you once had, but to the version of yourself who fit inside it. And that moment hurts. Not in the way grief first does, sharp and tearing. No. This is a softer sorrow, like finding your favorite sweater, only only to realize it no longer fits, not because it shrank, but because you've grown. We don't talk enough about the quiet grief of outgrowing our old life. How some friendships fade, not from anger, but because your values changed quietly in the night. How some routines lose meaning, not because they were bad, but because you are no longer the same person who needed them. You look back at old photos and feel love for that girl, but you don't recognize her anymore. You remember what she prayed for, what she chased, what she thought she couldn't live without. And now, you've lived without it. You survived the goodbye you once thought would break you. You became someone she wouldn't fully understand, but might be proud of. Still, some days you long for what felt easy. You miss the simplicity of not knowing, of loving without caution, of dreaming without bruises. But you can't unsee what you now know. You can't unfeel the stretch of becoming. And trying to go back would mean pretending you never grew in the first place. So instead, you start asking a different question. Not how do I return to the life I had, but how do I build a life that honors who I am now? Because healing doesn't mean restoring the past. It means allowing the future to look different than you expected. It means holding space for all the things that didn't work out, not as failures, but as redirections. It means understanding that some losses clear the path for a version of peace you never thought you'd earn. So no, you won't go back, but you can go forward. Not into a perfect life, not into certainty, but into something real. Something built slowly, honestly, with both hands, by the person you've become through every ache, every release, every morning you got up, even when no one saw you. You are not starting over. You're continuing with more truth, more depth, more of yourself intact. And that is not a loss. That's your quiet becoming. There's a moment, quiet and almost unnoticeable, when something shifts. You stop bracing. Your shoulders relax. Your jaw softens. Your heart no longer clenches at the idea of being seen. You are no longer chasing love. You are simply ready to receive it. Not in the desperate way you once did, searching for someone to fill the silence. Not in the guarded way you did after, building walls so tall, even tenderness couldn't climb them. But in a new way, a way that says, I know who I am now. I know what I bring. And I trust that what's meant for me will feel like rest, not performance. It's not about being finally healed. Healing is messy, non-linear, ongoing. It's about being willing to let love in, even if you're still unsure, even if your hands shake, even if you don't quite know where it will lead. Because now, you're not looking for rescue. You're not trying to prove you're lovable. You're not hoping someone else will finally give you the peace you never learned to give yourself. You've spent time alone, real time. You've made peace with your quiet. You've danced in your own kitchen. You've cried on your own shoulder. You've survived long enough to know you don't need love to live. But you're ready to welcome it. That's what's changed. You no longer confuse attention with care. You no longer twist yourself to fit inside someone else's idea of enough. You stand open-handed, not because you're empty, but because you're full. Full of your own presence, full of hard-earned tenderness, full of space that was once occupied by fear, and now is ready for something softer. And when it comes, whether slowly or all at once, you'll recognize it, not by how loud it arrives, but by how calm you feel when it stays. You'll feel it in the way someone listens without rushing to respond, in the way they ask questions not to fix you, but to understand, in the way they never make you feel like you have to earn their consistency. And most of all, you'll feel it in yourself, in how you receive it. Not with doubt, not with suspicion, but with quiet wonder. Because now you know you're worthy, not because you're perfect, not because you healed everything, but because you've lived through enough absence to finally recognize presence when it knocks. And this time, you'll open the door without holding your breath. It doesn't come loudly. Joy. Not after grief, not after heartbreak, not after the long nights when even hope felt like too much effort. It doesn't burst through the door with trumpets. It tiptoes, almost shy, like it's asking permission to come in. And at first, you don't trust it. You flinch at the good moments. You wait for the crash. You laugh, but with one eye open. Because for so long, joy came with consequences. The higher the high, the harder the fall. So you learned not to let it stay too long. You pushed it away before it could leave on its own. But something's different now. You're different. You don't need joy to prove anything. You don't need it to erase your pain. You're not begging it to save you. You're just quietly glad when it shows up. In the sunlight through the window, in the first sip of coffee, in that one friend who knows the exact moment to text, thinking of you. It's not grand, it's not loud, but it's real. And real joy, the kind that lasts, isn't about euphoria. It's about safety. It's about the first time you notice yourself smiling without effort. The first time your laugh surprises you. The first time your body moves to music and you don't feel like a stranger in your own skin. No audience, no performance, just a soft moment of presence. That's joy too, not the kind that blinds you, the kind that roots you. You start to trust it, bit by bit. You stop interrogating good days. You stop bracing for the reversal. You stop believing that peace is always temporary, because you've made it through enough storms to know sometimes the blue sky isn't a trick. Sometimes it's just the sky. You've grown enough to hold joy without needing it to cancel your sorrow. They can sit side by side now. And maybe that's the deepest kind of healing. Not joy instead of pain, but joy with pain, hand in hand. You don't have to pick one anymore. You don't have to be one thing. You can be whole, still healing, still soft, and still laughing. There's no final chapter, no neat ribbon, no moment where everything clicks and stays that way forever. Healing doesn't end. It just changes shape. The ache dulls. The questions soften. The sharp edges round themselves out like sea glass after years in salt water. You stop needing closure to breathe. You stop chasing people who chose to leave. You stop rereading old conversations, hoping for a different ending. Instead, you wake up one morning and realize you haven't thought about them in days. Not with pain, not with anger, just a quiet kind of peace. Not because they apologized, not because everything made sense, but because you no longer need that chapter to explain who you are. You've outgrown the wound, and in its place, not perfection, not enlightenment, but capacity to hold your own hand on hard days, to cry without shame, to laugh without guilt, to love again without erasing yourself. This is what continuation looks like. Not a straight line, not a triumphant rise, but a gentle choosing again and again to stay, to soften, to begin again. Some days it still hurts. Old ghosts knock, old fears whisper, but you know now you don't have to let them in. You can nod at the past without making it your home. You can keep walking. Not away from anything, but toward something quieter, truer, a life that fits the person you've become. One small act of self-honoring at a time. You don't need to be extraordinary. You just need to be honest. You just need to keep showing up for your own becoming, even when it's messy, even when no one sees it, even when you're tired, especially when you're tired, because that's when it matters most. That's when your soul takes note, not of your victories, but of your willingness to stay human in a world that keeps asking you to perform. So this isn't goodbye. This isn't a finish line. This is just the breath you take before the next quiet step. And you're ready. Not because everything is healed, not because you're unbreakable, but because you finally remembered your softness was never the problem. It was the way through. And you, exactly as you are, right here, right now, are more than enough to continue. And now, we've reached the quiet part of the night, where nothing needs to be solved, where no one is asking anything of you. Just stillness, just this breath, just you, finally, without effort. You don't need to go back. You don't need to chase forward. You don't need to understand everything that happened or everything that didn't. Right now, you are simply allowed to be. Let your body feel the weight of that permission. Let your spine soften. Let your hands uncurl. Let your legs sink into the mattress like warm roots finding earth. It's safe now to stop thinking, to stop waiting, to stop protecting your heart. Because in this moment, there's nothing frightening it. Here, you are not who you were when you lost them. You are not who you had to become to survive. You are just the quiet version of yourself, breathing, resting, remembering nothing but the softness. And that is enough. Let each breath grow slower now. Let your mind loosen its grip. Let your memories become shapes without names, like fog melting in morning light. You don't need to rehearse that moment again. You don't need to find the perfect words you never said. Whatever needed to be heard has already been felt. Whatever needed to return will know the way. When the thread is ripe and the heart is quiet, so let go now, gently, fully. Let the silence hold you. Let the night close around you like a soft blanket. Let the ache become peace. Let the longing become light. You are safe. You are home. You are allowed to rest. Say it with me inside if it feels right. I am resting. I am whole. I am allowed